Greetings. This is Paranormal M. Join us as we dive into the enigmatic stories that challenge conventional understanding. Consider supporting us by subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss a moment of our captivating narratives. I've seen various UFOs over the course of my life. The most notable and the most relevant ones are the ones that I saw with my brother and the one I saw with my wife. The one with my brother, we were out getting weed from a guy a few blocks away. We were sober until the trip back. I always have to clarify that part to people for some reason. And we see this spotlight attached to what appears to be an aircraft the size of a UH-1 Iroquois. Problem is, it isn't making no noise. Not a single sound. We can't really see the body, but a vague silhouette. We straight up pull over just to look at it. I even get out of the motherfucking car. Almost as if it knew that we were watching, it bolts out of there. A couple 100 miles an hour. Then, as quickly as it dipped, it jerks back the other way at an acute angle. Something like 270 degrees. Still no noise. This took place about 10 miles away from Lockheed Martin and Dobbins at around 3 a.m., Smyrna, Georgia. The one with the wife was a couple of weeks ago. 4 orbs above Lake Michigan. My wife says it's 5. We got a little Jean-Luc Picard Gull-Madrid argument going on about how many lights. It's kind of funny. Anyway, these lights are in line with Fond du Lac Avenue in Milwaukee. We were headed up northeast. Maybe it was over Lake Michigan, maybe Canada, I don't know. Looks about 30 or 40,000 feet. Lights are in pairs, from my perspective. Like headlights. Problem is, at that spacing, there's no way ATC would let 2 planes that size fly that close in overcast. Another issue, they aren't fucking moving. I thought they were coming straight on, but after 15 minutes, that theory was out. They also didn't have the green and red running lights, just steady white lights. I'm prepared to just write it off as a perspective thing. But then one light goes out, then another. They all went out one at a time. That's when I realized it was 4 individual craft and not 2. I also met Egragor when I was a teenager, or an Egragor. I was with a roommate. We had been casting a summoning circle for a Wiccan spell. We used to practice, but don't anymore after that. We were, I guess, a bit greedy with our spell, making prosperity charms for ourselves and not others. It may or may not have closed the circle properly. Afterward, during the witching hour, the hallway towards the room that we were casting in grew dark. We felt cold and felt paralyzed. The only thing we really saw was a shadowy figure lurching in his doorway. We were terrified. I only know how to classify whatever it was as an Egragor, because of all the monetary woe that followed me around for the next few years. It must have been that. I don't even like speaking its name, especially knowing I'm actually doing okay for once. I'm gonna go burn some fucking sage before I end up homeless again. I experienced a lot of weird things growing up. Most of them I can explain. But there was this one night I can't. I had a battery-powered travel DVD player on my bed late one night when I was 13. At the same time, my boombox was on, plugged into the wall. My dresser was up against a door I wasn't allowed to open. It was an unfinished space. It was originally meant to be a bathroom. But the previous owners just never finished it, and my parents had no intentions to. I was told I could possibly fall through the floor, so don't even open the door. While I'm watching my movie, suddenly my DVD player and boombox stop playing at the same time. And this sounds cliche as fuck, but I could hear what sounded like little girls laughing behind the door I was told never to open. My mom would scream at me if I woke her up for nothing, so I moved the dresser by myself. The giggling continued the whole process of moving my dresser. I put my hand on the doorknob and yanked it open. Giggling stops. The light in my room lights up the empty space. It's tiny, and it's just wood in there. There wasn't even tile or a mirror. I waited for a minute, closed the door. Still no giggling again. And then, suddenly, my boombox and DVD player resumed playing at the same moment. I've always wondered if it was some freaky lightning thing or what. I have 3 things happening. All of them happening in connection with the death of 3 different people. My grandfather, my father-in-law, and my grandmother, my grandfather's wife. My grandfather died at the hospital from pneumonia when he was old. A couple of days after that, a small lamp in the hallway in my grandmother's house started to flicker. The lamp had been there for at least 30 years or so, and there was never any problems with it. At least my grandmother said. We tried changing the light bulb, but the flickering continued, so we threw the lamp away due to potential electricity hazards. My father-in-law passed away a few years later due to a disease. A couple of days after his death, my wife and I woke up to the TV in the living room being turned on full volume, really loud, on some random channel that we had. That had never happened before, and we don't have any animals that could have touched the remote or the TV. My wife and I both were shocked, and we immediately said that it must be a sign from her father. By the way, I'm not religious at all, but interested in paranormal happenings. My grandmother passed away from Alzheimer not long ago. I was with her when she took her last breath at the home for old people where she was living. A few days after, she died. And a lamp in my kitchen started to flicker. The lamp was almost new. The light bulb almost new as well. And the house almost new, 3 years. And it had never happened before. We let the flickering continue due to us seeing this as a sign from my grandmother. She and I were very close, and the flickering made me think that she was still with us. I told my wife when the flickering started, but I had heard from her brother-in-law, or maybe from someone else, that it takes 40 days for the dead person to pass to the other side, as it were. And I was counting the days the flickering continued. Exactly 40 days after the death of my grandmother, the flickering stopped. The 3 events combined made me think at least, or hope, that they wanted to say goodbye through the means that they had after death. My parents were on vacation, and I stayed home a longer period of time. On the 13th Friday night, my parents should have been back on Sunday. I called up a few friends at my house for a sort of party, and we stayed until 3 a.m. when my parents called them to go home. I went with them half the distance when we suddenly stopped in the middle of the street. We saw a bright light coming toward us, which seemed like the ones from a car, but it was only one. We moved on the left side of the road and let it pass, but it stopped 50 meters away. A really tall person got out of the car and pointed at something in the sky before starting to run in our direction. Suddenly, the man, let's just say he was a man, screamed horrible and the streetlights went off. And at the moment that we returned back to my house and locked every door and window, we got so scared that we stayed up all night with the lights on and a knife on each of us. Next morning, I called my grandparents to check if they were all right and heard if anything weird was happening the night before. The encounter was right in front of their house. They said that they heard a scream, but nothing else. They offered to come to my house, to stay over there with us. We decided to turn to the news, and we saw something similar that happened in the other side of the the other side of the country. But the worst thing was that a few people were found dead in that instance. AskReddit. This is going to be long-winded, because I need to describe how my apartment looked like for this to really make sense. This was when I was very young. I don't know, maybe around the age of 7. I spent my childhood in an obscure Southeast Asian country, as my dad had a business there. We lived in a really big apartment, and it felt like a giant circular slice of a cylindrical apartment building. The whole apartment was weirdly designed. There was a single separating wall that went through the radius of my apartment. Most bedrooms and the living room were on one side of the radius, while the other side we used for guest rooms, laundry room, and storage. Our living room has a door, the only door that connects the livelier side to the creepy side of our apartment. That side of the apartment was always empty. It feels like there's 2 people at most of the times, either the maid or the maid and one of my family members. And not just that, we always get complaints from the maid about her feeling unnerved every time she entered that side of the apartment. One time she even claimed that she saw a silhouette of a lady standing over at the washing machine area. I agree with her on the creepy vibes of that side, but I've never really seen anything supernatural before. It feels like I'm being watched every time I enter the creepy side. My parents do not believe in ghosts or anything supernatural, so they always brush it off as just imagination or some illusion caused by lighting in the apartment. I tried to have the attitude or mindset because I didn't want to believe that supernatural stuff like ghosts were real. I had a Nintendo Entertainment System at that time, which I regarded as peak entertainment for kids. I could only play it at the end of every semester. The TV and my console were placed close to the separating wall, so every time I was gaming, I would be facing the wall and the door that connects to the creepy side. And for some reason, it was always open because my parents wanted some quote-unquote airflow or some nonsense. So this open door that leads to pitch darkness on the right side of my vision every time I was watching TV or playing video games. One awful night, I was the only one in the living room playing my NES. My parents were downstairs with my uncle and his wife, singing songs and talking about the good old days. I wasn't interested, so I was alone, upstairs, on my Nintendo, playing Gradius, just moments before that thing traumatized me. From my peripherals, I saw something white dash out of the creepy side through that door of the pitch darkness. I freaked out and turned to look at what it was, to see if it was one of my family members. I still can't remember what I saw clearly. It was kind of humanoid, but for some reason my eyes couldn't make out the specific features. It was like a white, vaguely humanoid blur running around. I can't even be sure if it was running because normally a human's movement has some vertical motion to it, like a bobbing up and down motion, because of how our legs work, right? That white blur moved strictly horizontally, no up-down motion at all, like it's just gliding towards me at full speed. I don't know why it was so fucking fast, because by the time I reacted, it had already turned and was making its way toward me. I dropped my controller, screamed very loudly, and ran down to my parents and my relatives. I didn't even turn around. I started crying and telling my mother all about it. They were skeptical at first, but probably after seeing me shaking like crazy, my dad and uncle went up to see if there was an intruder or something. They came back down like 10 minutes later, saying there's nothing up there. The window and the doors were locked from the inside. No signs of a break-in, and the rug or mat placed on the door that leads to the creepy side was unmoved. The conclusion they caved to was that I've been playing too many games and I'm just imagining things. This was the one and only paranormal thing I've witnessed, and it left me traumatized. I just hit 25, basically a full-grown adult, but you'll never find me in a dark place alone. I also learned to sleep with the lights on because of that. As an adult, I tried rationalizing what I saw. At first, I thought someone was pulling a sick joke on a child like me, but it didn't make sense because, one, that was just going too far. No sensible adult would do that. And two, there were only 5 people, including me, at my apartment that night. 4 of them were downstairs, and I wouldn't have seen anyone going that to the creepy side because they would have to go through me. I also tried to convince myself that it was just an illusion, that I was just imagining things, but I've had these quote-unquote corner of my eye movements, where if I turned to look at it, it would just disappear or be something else. This was not that kind of movement. When I turned my gaze to it, I can still see it, gliding towards me. Its position and motion were consistent the whole way. That white blur was so real to me. Back when I was in middle school, I believe the 6th grade, I had just got home from school. I was always alone after school. My siblings all participated in after-school activities, and the parents were working. I walked to the kitchen to grab a snack from the fridge, and as I got to it, out of nowhere, I just got this overwhelming sensation of dread. There was a chair right to the right of the fridge, and I collapsed into it, and just had my head held down with my eyes shut. As I was trying to gather myself, I quickly realized that it was completely silent, like no sound whatsoever, as if the whole house I was in had been muted by a remote control. All of a sudden, a loud noise came from underneath the chair I was in. Best way I can describe it, it sounded like somebody just aggressively crumbling up a sheet of paper. With how quiet it was just before, I was starting to just leap out of the chair. Just as I jumped up to my feet, I quickly spun around, facing the chair. Then I just hear running footsteps coming from the hallway right behind me, leading to the front of the house, followed by a little girl giggling. I backed myself into the wall with my eyes fixated on the door leading to the hallway, and slowly slid myself to the back door. As I reached it, I bolted out of there and ran down the street to my friend's house. I called my mom and told her what had happened, and she told me to stay out until the others had gotten home first. Biggest and most notable experience was my first. We moved into our house when I was 6, currently 21, and for the first few weeks there weren't any issues. Then my parents wanted to look in the attic, which for some reason I was very adamant that they didn't, like continuously asking them not to open it. And I remember being uneasy. As soon as they popped it open, I saw just a dark hole. I was immediately confused because there was nothing there. I had not had any prior knowledge of ghosts and such at that time, so I just didn't know why I was so freaked out when seemingly nothing was there. Soon after that, I started seeing this girl sitting on our stairs. Our inside stairs to the second floor was lattice work below the railing, so it's got like a little grid section that you can see out of. She would sit a bit past the middle of the steps, look out the lattice, and place one hand partially in one of the lattices. And every time she sat there, she would just stare at us, as if she was missing something. And she freaked me out because I started to notice nobody else was bothered by her at all. After a while, my mom noticed me staring up there, weird expression and all. And so she asked me about it, and I told her there was a girl sitting on our steps. My mother having had a paranormal experience with her first husband, many years before I or my dad were part of her life, she believed me. So she slowly went to the stairs and pointed at her, like, right there? What does she look like? She sitting here? The girl responded to my mom, not ever talking but in her body language. She looked nervous and fearful of what my mom's intent was. Before climbing the stairs that my mom just flicked on the light, girl disappeared. Turned it off, girl was there. While she was making her way up the steps, she got maybe a quarter up, and then the girl ran up the rest of the stairs, disappearing as her foot hit the top step. I don't know how long I saw her after that point, but she always looked sad, dirty, or bruised. I couldn't tell. Really old, raggedy-looking nighty. But otherwise looked like a normal kid. Wasn't like mad creepy or anything. The last day I ever saw her, she was sitting on the stairs as usual, and at some point she made eye contact with me. And immediately her face turned to fear, her eyes widened, and she looked genuinely horrified. All I saw was a large man-looking hand grab her forearm and start pulling her up the stairs aggressively. Pulling as you would when a kid is arguing to not go, but harshly in this case. That's the worst part about it all that I can remember. It was the horrified look on her face. She'd never looked like that before. As always, when she hit the top step, she disappeared, and I never saw her again after that. I drew her months to a year later, but my art skill wasn't particularly great as a 7 or 8-year-old. And I have no idea where it is now, if we still even have it. This is far from the only experience I've had in this house, but by far the biggest/first one I ever had, so it really stuck with me. I think about her from time to time and hope that she's okay, as she can be, something that I consider to be my first. And I felt really helpless at the time, just having to watch it take place and not being able to help her. I was working in a building that was built in the early 1900s as a Catholic hospital. It's now an assisted living home, and I happen to work the night shift. I've experienced a plethora of things, as well as coworkers. Here's a list of some of them. There are 4 ghosts who are most regularly seen. The Peeker, who I've seen a handful of times. I'll be there 2 years in August, by the way. He likes to look around corners at you and slowly gets further and further around the corner until you look up. He'll be shocked and duck. And when you see him, he's gone. Several of my coworkers have seen him, and we all laugh at how funny he looks when he's caught. The nuns. I did say it was a Catholic hospital. Of course, there'd be nuns. I've seen one fully realized, floating. Almost looked like she was running, going from one resident's room across to the dining area to another. Lots of coworkers have seen them in the reflections of the glass, walking next to us. On the 5th floor, there's one who, if you listen, you can hear her heavy footsteps walking behind you. I had one resident who saw ghosts easily. She would often be teaching a class of student ghosts in her room. And there was a time I was helping her, and she said that there was a lady behind me who was wearing a veil looking over my shoulder. I said, "I hope she thinks I'm doing a good job." And my resident said, "Well, she must, because she just left." We consider the nuns as our coworkers as well, because strange things will happen. Someone speaking, items being moved, doors closing. And we usually take it as a nun has seen something going on. A resident is up or wandering or someone's hurt. So we go check all the rooms. 8 times out of 10, something is going on with the resident. The Dark Man. He wears all dark clothes and has dark features. I've never seen him, but a couple coworkers and residents have. He leans against a wall and will watch you work. When you realize he's there and do a double take, he's gone. No one knows who he is or if he's friendly, but he's never done anything that would indicate that he's mean. The Long Man. Only residents have seen him, and I hope I never see him. He's frightening. From the description my residents have given, let's just say I wouldn't want to see him. He'll be in the resident's ceiling, and when they notice him, he extends down into their doorways and wears a big smile. He's really tall and has sort of a stoop in the doorway. He won't move until the resident begins to scream. Yeah, it's that terrifying. And then he disappears into the floor. Absolutely horrifying. As for some of my experiences, other than the usual saw it out of the corner of my eye bullshit, these are hauntings that I've personally experienced, or have been around when coworkers experienced themselves. Just a few nights ago, I was mopping up the floor in front of the kitchen. The door to the kitchen has a small glass window, and I was about 8 feet away. I looked up, and there was a man looking through the window. He looked extremely unusual. His skin was as pink as a pig's, and his eyes were wide open looking down. When I did a double take, I thought, was that my reflection? Then he was gone. I still looked into my reflection, but mine was much darker and less defined than what I saw. I told my coworker. They came down into the kitchen and began to yell at the ghost. I told her that it wasn't necessary. About an hour later, we were eating and talking about the interaction with a separate coworker, when a full milk jug that had been sitting on the table suddenly flew off, and a split second, perfectly on the floor. I said, "Oh, you pissed him off," and we all kind of joked about it, moving forward. Catholic hospital. I was still fresh, and I was new, and I was trying to drag these heavy baskets of laundry. I happened to be in front of the nurse's office, which used to be the head nun's office, and I cursed. Shit and ass damn. Interesting choice. And all of the heavy fire doors around me slammed shut. I immediately apologized for cursing. I was terrified to open the doors because I thought an angry nun would be behind them. I was walking along the 3rd floor when I saw a dark shadow and it dipped into a room. We had a resident who was actively dying on hospice. The spirits always get antsy when someone's dying. I said, "She's on the 2nd floor if that's who you're looking for." A little over an hour later, the lady passed away. My coworker on the first night went into a room and immediately came back out. She said she'd seen a dark shadow child standing next to a dying resident's bed. The child looked up at her, then just walked through the wall. She wanted us to come in with her after that. The coworker was in the kitchen when a voice said, "Shut the damn door." Door was shut and the steel cabinets all flew open. She was absolutely terrified, and I remember how scared that she sounded when she paged up for assistance in the kitchen. Previous coworker, who'd yell at the ghost before, was the one who went down to yell once again. Coworker came and got me and said the radio in the dining room turned on and wanted me to shut it off. When we went in, it was off. I said, "Well, it's time for everyone to go to bed anyways. Go to sleep." The ghosts must not have liked that, because the door shut and the radio turned on to old jazz music. So I said, "Fine, but don't be grouchy in the morning." My fiancé at the time and I went to visit my dad. We had just bought a property built in the 1800s. And this was just a place to eventually modernize and sell. It was still in great shape, and he invited us to stay there for the weekend instead of bothering with a hotel. We arrived and tired from our drive, and pretty quickly found the master bed and bathroom to get ready for bed. While using the restroom, I noticed some cold drafts and heard some rhythmic pacing-like sounds coming from the wooden floors. I brushed the cold off without the thought at the time and assumed my fiancé was just looking around the room, even though the walking sounds was more like a boot than a foot with socks hitting the floor. At any rate, we both went to bed and fell asleep pretty quickly. At some point, my fiancé is nudging me in the side. "Sweetheart, sweetheart." She's whispering but has an urgency in her voice. I opened my eyes and my heart and blood went cold for a second. There's a faint white figure standing there, just looking at us at the foot of the bed. We both saw it clear as day. What was even more jarring is that same draftiness I felt before was back. The figure had a feminine essence and somehow an 1800s look. Fiancé and I held hands underneath the covers, but sort of both awkwardly caught off guard. The thing we both remember now, aside from being a bit petrified, is that we didn't really sense any hostility or malice. Just a good 10 minutes of holy crap. The figure stayed relatively still, just sort of shifting her head back and forth like you would while looking at an item at sale or something interesting. Then, as suddenly as everything started, the figure just went away. The rest of the time, we just noticed odd sounds and slept downstairs in the living room, all lights on. My dad also had a Corvette stored in the carriage house, but my fiancé insisted that there was bad energy, so we never went in and took it out for a spin. AskReddit. One weekend, I was at my dad's house. He'd come to the upstairs bathroom to get a shave and heard footsteps in my stepsister's room. I thought it was him walking around initially, so I got up to find him. Gecko. And he was standing at her closed door. He looks back at me and whispers, "You can hear that too, right?" I nodded, and he opened the door slowly. My stepsister was asleep, and never had been awake apparently, and there was no way that she could have crossed the room, gotten into bed, and pretended to be that convincingly asleep in the 2 seconds it took my dad to open the door. He went in, checked her TV, which had never been on. She has one of those big ones from the 90s that would get warm when turned on. The radio hadn't been on either. Figured maybe it was just the beat of a song or something. After that, we heard the footsteps a bunch of times, usually very early in the morning. Some of the footsteps were so heavy they'd shake the ceiling fan of the dining room directly underneath her bedroom, and they'd woken her up a few times as well. Whenever I'd shower at my dad's, I always felt like someone was standing behind me. Eventually, I got so stressed and paranoid that I refused to shower in the house, or even go into the upstairs bathroom. My dad asked me one day, "Do you ever feel like someone in the shower is with you when you're here?" After months of me feeling that way and never mentioning it to anyone. AskReddit. I was in art class when I was 15. And a random teacher's aide, a lady in her 60s, unassuming Nana type, sat down next to me and said that she had a vision about my job as an adult. I was like, "Oh, am I a photographer?" She said no. I was fairly dismissive and skeptical because I was certain that's what I'd be doing. But I said, "Oh, yo, tell me what you saw." She then went on to describe my job. None of it made much sense at the time, and you could tell that she didn't quite understand what she saw. She said she couldn't figure out where I was, because the place had no windows and everything was a pastel green color. She said I was making something that looked like CD covers, but they weren't that. She went on to explain that I was working with a bunch of guys, and some of them were helping and teaching me do the job. But the thing that really stuck out was that she keeps seeing me do this thing where I look at whatever it was I was making, and that I would change the angle of it. She mimicked what I was doing. Anyway, about 8 years later, I ended up doing exactly all the things she said I was going to do. I was a wine label flexographic printer helper, I guess. It got me so bad, or rather it got to me so bad that my future was set in stone that I eventually quit my job to pursue a fine art and photography career. That was a few years back, and I'm about to have my second solo exhibition opening this weekend. What I still haven't figured out yet was, have I broken the timeline, or was I just meant to have that, future told and then pursue a different career? It's all pretty out there, and I'm not too sure what to make of it because I'm not the type of person to believe in that sort of stuff. But, it happened, so there are people that can see into the future, and they are 100% right. I hear clapping outside my window every night at 2 a.m. Oh, we got a warning here, guys. This is saying it's not safe for work. So, the narrator here has given you fair warning, and I proceed. I always tried to sleep with my curtains and window open. I've just never been that cautious, but recently I started to hear someone or something making clapping sounds outside. Oh no. I didn't think too much of it, and I would just go to sleep. But last night, my friend, let's call her Tracy, slept at mine, and at exactly 2 a.m., the sound started again. So feeling brave, me and Tracy tried to investigate where the sound was coming from. I put my flashlight on and checked my garden, but as I thought, nothing. So we both lay back down, and the sound stopped for a few minutes. And then started again, and that's when I saw it. Someone, or should I say something, was lying down over my roof just staring at us. Before I go on, I should probably explain how my roof sits. I live in quite a small house, and the way it is built is quite strange. My bedroom is on the second floor, and there's a little gap between my window and the roof. The roof goes out a slight bit, and it's just in reaching distance. Anyways, in shock, me and Tracy slammed the window shut and closed the curtains, and we stayed dead silent for what felt like hours. Feeling stupidly brave again, we decided to open the curtains and have a quick look to make sure our imagination wasn't just getting the better of us. And there it was again, but this time closer. I don't even know how to describe what we seen. This thing had white blonde raggedy hair, and all I can remember is the eyes, strangely enough. And I couldn't remember a face, just that hair and eyes, like it was glaring into my soul. Panicking, I text my old friend who lives across from me to check out my roof, as both of us couldn't move and we were in shock. She told me she couldn't see anything, so we opened the window one last time, and there was nothing. No noise, no person. We locked the window again and tried to distract ourselves till morning. Since Tracy went home, everything feels off, and strange stuff has been happening. I keep hearing creaking and doors opening around the house. My nose has bled nonstop, and I'm starting to panic staying here alone. I've locked all my doors, windows, and curtains. That's the end of the story. It seems perfectly safe for work. I was ready for something worse. Next story. Does anybody know anything about or seen ghosts carrying wagons before? When I was 5, I was in the car with my parents and sister. I think it was either in Fluorescent, Colorado, or Florissant, perhaps, or on our drive to Colorado, because we had just moved there. It was like 2003 at the time. They went to the gas station, and I was tired and I didn't feel like going in. It was on a hill with dirt dug out to make room for the gas station. After they went in, I saw 2 glowing white figures carrying a wagon with a figure inside, and it looked like a dog or something with wings. I know it sounds dumb, but I know I was awake because I was so terrified that I hid behind the seat in the car. I watched them slowly walk to the back of the gas station, and then my family came back. Part of me wanted to go back there and look, but I was too scared. I asked my mom, and she said she remembers me telling her about it. Has anyone experienced something similar? Another strange fact is that later on we moved back to Florida, and we stayed at my grandma's house for a while. I don't think the house was old or anything, but I went to sleep for like 5 minutes, and I woke up and someone was whispering my name. I thought my sister was playing pranks on me. I went to her room and asked her, but she was just pissed off that I woke her up and everyone else in the house was dead asleep. Maybe I'm insane, but sometimes I feel like something followed us and has been plaguing my family ever since. My dad became an abusive psycho when we first moved to Colorado, and then my mom got dystonia at the same time. It was also the same year that she apparently went to a psychic. We moved back to Colorado in the Woodland Park, and later on my dad got way more abusive towards me and told me that he thought I was possessed because I was just staring at the ceiling one day. I ended up being in a foster home due to my father's abuse, and my parents ended up getting divorced. What makes it scarier is that I still have no idea what happened. This is the only weird or paranormal thing that's ever happened to me. I was 11 and recently moved to another city with my family due to my father being in the country's army. We were staying there for a year, and thankfully, the army gave us a decent house in a complex building built for officials with families. Each house had their own large backyard and was separated from other houses by 12-foot concrete walls. One Sunday, my family went to buy some stuff at the supermarket. My older sister went with them, and my little one was still a baby, so I was going to be alone for a couple of hours. I was okay just playing with my dog, but I remember that I needed to get my black socks from my school. I guess I had my school's Monday uniform, and it resembled a suit and a tie kind of a look. I went to the backyard to get them, since they were hanging to dry. At this point, I was getting bored of waiting for my socks, and I say out loud, "I'm really bored," only to almost immediately hear a young voice clearly say, "Then let's play." The voice was clear but not loud. Didn't feel like it came from in front of me or any of my sides. It was just there. I turned around to see my normally hyperactive golden retriever sitting quietly and staring at me. I look around very fast, trying to sort of find the source of the voice, but the house to the right was empty and separated by a concrete wall, like I said. The house to the left was over 50 feet away and behind the wall as well. And behind my house, there was a long wall with nothing but a steep hill and a house at the bottom behind it. I ran for dear life and hid in my parents' bedroom underneath the covers and turned on the TV at max volume until they arrived. I explained to them what happened, and they had to calm me down for the rest of the day. I have no idea what that was, and to this day I still can't put my finger on it. I knew the kids in the house to the left, and it wasn't any of their voices. The house to the right didn't have any kids. And there's no way some kid climbed a hill, then a 12-foot wall covered in sharp glass at the top, just to say that to me. Is my house haunted? I literally don't know how to explain this. For the last few nights, I keep seeing things. But I convinced myself that it was just my illusion and slept. Last night, I can't get over. I'm for sure something was there. Honestly, for a few years I saw stuff. But then they would disappear until this year. I don't know what to do. I can't describe when I've been seeing. Perhaps they meant what. But a little information of an older story. I was chilling at night, and my lights can dim and get brighter. I noticed my lights dimmed a little, and then it went back to the old setting that I had set them on originally. Another old story. This one's during the day. I didn't see anything, but I heard and felt it. I was chilling and heard loud footsteps and then felt something heavy sit on my mattress. For both of these instances, I got my ass up and ran. Last night, I was so scared and felt so uneasy. The last couple of nights themselves made me feel like I was being watched while I was sleeping. And I swore I saw something in the closet. But last night, it was INA. Different spot. Oh, it was in a different spot. I was so scared and shit, and I can't move. So I shut my eyes and prayed in my head to Lord Krishna till I fell asleep. I completely forgot about last night until now. My back was itchy and I felt a scar, like a scratch. I didn't scratch myself, and I heard that ghosts can give you scratches. Perhaps. Is my house haunted? Part 2. I had evidence this time. I have a puppy. His name's Teddy. He hasn't been doing this lately, but I'm sure he's seen something that we don't. Me and my mom sleep, and most nights my dad's at work. He works at night, but on his days off he spends his time watching TV. Now, when my dad leaves the room and my dog sees, he barks loud. He only barks loud when he sees someone, whether it's us when he hasn't seen us for a while or a stranger. This is important. Sometimes he barks weirdly. When he sees a stranger, she barks loud. I'll come back to this. But he seemed scared. He was hesitating to bark. My mom woke up, put him on the floor. He ran over and looks up, and it seemed like he was following something going down the stairs or something. I know he saw something and was following it. He began scratching my leg and told me to take him downstairs. He only does this when he desperately wants to go down there. He usually does it when my mom comes home from work and she hasn't come up in a while and he gets tired of waiting. This time I know he's seen something. A few nights ago, he barked at my dad's room. My dad was at work. He wasn't barking the weird way, like I just stated. He was barking the same way he barks when he sees a stranger in or out of the house. He also barked like that when there was something unusual. Not like a box of tissues, something large. The last time he barked at an object, it was an AC in the field, more half of my size. Sometimes I hear things that my dog does as well. One time he heard it so bad he walked off the pillow. He sleeps on my bed. Walked across the bed, not like he usually did. Like he was in a rush, trying to protect the house. He only walks like that when someone gets home and he's rushing to see them. He stared for a long time before sleeping. AskReddit. When I was 15, I was up in my room, laying on my bed and reading. Then I heard a loud, angry stomping coming from up the stairs. Loud stomping down the hallway. Thought it was my 12-year-old sister, who always threw tantrums. So I stopped reading and watched my door, anticipating my sister to come flying in at any second. Once the stopping got to my door flew open super hard and fast, like it was kicked open. Then, no one was there. It was super quiet. I knew it wasn't my brother because I had a clear view of his door, and the second my door flew open. And his door was shut. I went to his room and he was laying down with headphones on, so he didn't hear it. I went downstairs, and my sister was sitting peacefully on the couch with my parents. They didn't hear a thing either. My door got a big dent because when it flew open, it hit my dresser. Another time I was on the toilet, and there was a glass decorative bowl on the back of the toilet. Then I heard the sound of the glass bowl sliding across the porcelain. I looked behind me, and the bowl all of a sudden landed and shattered 6 feet away. I didn't see it fly or anything, just once I turned to look at it, I heard it hit the floor 6 feet away. It shattered into so many pieces, and it was super loud. AskReddit. Most of my friends have had trouble with substance abuse throughout their lives. Just the crowd I hung around with, I guess. Around the time of this story, one of my closest friends was clean off H for longest that they'd ever been. A couple of months, but still fantastic progress for him. And things were looking good. We were hanging out one day and he gave me some great news. Since middle school, he and his mom had been fighting for medical malpractice lawsuits that happened to him when he was younger, and they won. He got something like $10,000 to $15,000 out of the deal. So most of what we talked about that day was how he was going to buy his mom something nice, and how he was going to use that money to finally go to college. I honestly hadn't seen him that happy in years, and it was great. A day or two later, I was sleeping like normal, when all of a sudden, I woke up at around 1 a.m. I felt great. In fact, I felt absolutely euphoric. I felt like I was lying in the sun of the most beautiful summer's day in a puddle of 1,000 puppies. I was pretty happy. And that was just the first second. The second was like 1,000 times, and the next second was like 1,000 times as well. Within moments, I went from, this is pretty nice, to, oh shit, something is seriously, before blacking out. All of a sudden, I was walking down the stairs to my friend's basement. It was absolutely destroyed with shit thrown everywhere. Empty bottles and syringes laying around, and he was sitting there, waiting for me, on the couch, with tears in his eyes. He kept repeating that he was sorry, that he didn't want to hurt anybody. He said the money didn't last him long, and he's been basically being back to his broke-ass self, and he was sorry for bringing me there, and that he just needed to say goodbye to someone before finally saying goodbye, though. and everything fading out in another wave of euphoria. Me being logical to a fault, and pretty straightforward, I woke up the next morning thinking, damn, what a dream. But not much else of it. I wrote it down in a dream journal, and then I completely forgot about it. Ended up going to work and class like normal. Then, a couple hours later, my friend's mom called. She called me to break the news that my friend had passed away. Overdose. It wasn't until a couple of months later when another friend of mine, also an ex-addict, was trying to console my boyfriend, console me by telling me about he went with no pain and how it was probably the best thing to go when it starts to get really weird. He started to explain to me what an overdose actually feels like, the overwhelming euphoria, and how it's impossible to explain to someone who's never experienced it before, i.e. me. It was then that what he was describing started to sound really familiar, and I went to my phone, opened my dream journal, and started reading the entry from a couple months back to him out loud. He pretty much said, "Yeah, exactly that. Where'd you get that story?" and told him the whole thing. Both of us were at a loss for words, and I still am. As I said, I don't believe in this stuff, and if someone told me this story, I would say that they were high as fuck, but it's a memory that I'll personally never forget. Weird dream that might have been real? This happened in, I want to say, October last year. If someone wants the exact date, I can probably find it, but it would just take a while. So, October. It was the night of my school's homecoming dance that I wasn't particularly excited for. I got peer pressured into it by my friends, because I'm not a very social person and wouldn't much rather not gone. Anyways, my school has this rule for events that you can't arrive past a certain time and you can't leave before a different certain time. I have no clue why. It's pretty stupid. I don't remember what time it was because my friend took my phone because I was quote-unquote using it too much and needed to go talk to some girls. I ended up sitting in a chair near the backside of the gym, which is facing the front lawn the whole night. I somehow fall asleep in said chair and had a very strange dream that I guess I can still remember it in vivid detail right now. The dream is in a first-person's perspective of some guy operating a machine. There are a bunch of buttons and knobs and levers all around me, and there's a massive black box in the center of the room. I'm pressing a bunch of stuff and some other guy comes in wearing a night robe, rubbing his eyes, clearly tired. "It's so late, go to bed. It's not working and it's not going to work before tomorrow." "One more, I need one more," I responded, but the voice is a lot deeper, just not at all similar to my normal voice. My guess is that they were all around college age. So the other guy sighs, walks away, and I keep pressing buttons. Then the box in the room starts glowing and vibrating, and then explodes with a purplish red light. So I wake up, and I'm back in the chair at the dance. I'm startled by the dream, and I fall back in the chair, and I'm looking through this big window on one of the walls. And I swear on my life, I saw a dude in a lab coat sprinting across the lawn. I completely lose my shit and I try to leave to investigate, but I guess it was before 10 o'clock, so I couldn't leave. I had to sit there for 20 minutes wondering what the fuck I saw. And the worst part is, This girl I liked asked me to dance with her, and for a split second, she was replaced with a woman I don't recognize who had blood all over her face and was screaming. So that didn't work out. After the dance, when I was walking home, I saw a massive square hole in the ground by the train tracks next to my school. I have seen both of my great-grandparents post-mortem. There are 2 times I saw one of my great-grandparents. One I do and one I don't remember. Number 1. Great-grandfather. My great-grandfather died long before I was born, but I saw him once, and only once, when I was 4. My great-grandmother was on her deathbed from complications due to a botched surgery, and we were saying our final goodbyes. I was waiting outside the room in one of those sitting areas with my family, and after giving my final goodbye, an old man in his 70s approached me, wearing a brown vest, a brown newsboy cap, and a pair of glasses. He had a white mustache, and he introduced himself to me as my great-grandfather. I talked to him for a couple of minutes. I don't remember about what, but I hugged him and then he parted ways with me. Years later, I found out who he was and that he died before I was born, and I was left shocked. I told them about talking to him and described him and the newsboy cap. There were no pictures of him wearing a newsboy cap, although he did wear it occasionally. Number 2. Great-grandmother. This one's a lot shorter because I don't remember it. Basically, a year or 2 after she died, we went back to Pittsburgh to visit family. Me and my brother were laughing, and my mom asked why we said Bubba, her nickname, and it seemed like we were having a conversation with her. I was tormented by a spirit during my first 2 years at university. In 2020, I moved over 6 hours away from my hometown in southern Ontario to attend university up north. I moved into my town with my best friend from high school, whom I had known for years. In this building, it's important to note that it's been around since the school was first built. However, it's frequently renovated and worked on because it more often than normal catches fire. More details later. So to set the scene, it's 2020, mid-pandemic, and I had just been discharged from the Army. My best friend and I applied for the same university major and had decided that if we got in, that we would live together. Well, sure enough, we got in, and the only dorm that could accommodate our room request, i.e. moving into the same apartment with separate bedrooms, was situated directly across from a hospice. And for those that don't know what a hospice is, it's a medical facility where people go when they're close to death to live out the end of their lives in as much comfort as possible. This hospice was the only view out of our small windows, and was the only one in our area. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the building frequently caught fire, but what was odd, and worth mentioning, was that it only caught fire in apartment number 5 on any given floor. My best friend and I lived on the 5th floor in the 5th apartment for 2 years, even throughout the summer. Unfortunately, we never had a fire, but frequently found ourselves having to accommodate firefighters and other workers entering our room due to the smoke and water damage from various different fires from random floors directly above us. Along with my BFF, I had 2 other roommates who were very vocal about when they were home or when they left. We had a group chat. And for all of these experiences, they were never home, or even in the city for that matter. My friend and I both got jobs working at a level 1 trauma center as night shift security, and thus, paranormal stuff didn't scare us as we were frequently forced to work with the morgue and even witness people die on a daily basis. With a whole bunch of other things happening. Maybe more stories for another time. The main experience that happened was early on. It was when my BFF and I both awoke to hear someone going through our cupboards and garbage in the kitchen, which was right against my bedroom wall, thus making it super loud. It was about 1 p.m., and because we were on night shift, it was our version of 1 a.m. So, thinking my best friend had gotten up, oddly early, I went to talk to her. But when I opened my door, there was no one. I woke her up quietly, and we searched the entire apartment and the hallways with whatever we could use as weapons. There was no one, but everything was open. Our fridge, the oven, drawers, cabinets, and our garbage had been thrown across the room. All the breakers in our apartment had been switched off as well, which we didn't discover at first. It is important to mention that the only entry into our apartment was the front door, and it automatically locked when closed, so it was most definitely locked 24/7. I called building security, and no one had been seen on camera entering our dorm, except for my BFF and me around 8 a.m., after we had gotten off work at the hospital. There was no explanation for who had done this, but still, they took our statements and said that we do patrols. They never found more information. Over 3 months later, it was summer, and my BFF and I had been 2 of 11 people left in the building over the summer, with the rest being mostly just international students who could afford to do quarantine protocols again in September, as it took 2 weeks. We were the only ones on our floor, but regularly heard stomping outside in the hall, but neither of us saw anybody. We looked through the peepholes, and even we heard knocks on the front door. However, when we checked, no one, every time. So aside from the knocking and stomping, super quiet summer, except for one morning, I'll never forget it, shook us to the bone. It was 10 a.m., and my roommate and I were asleep after work. I never locked my bedroom door, as my BFF loved to come in and hang all the time, but for some reason, I locked it that entire week. And good thing, too, because I awoke to a frantic, and I mean frantic knocking. No pounding on my bedroom door. I was obviously super disoriented, as I had just finished a 12-hour shift a few hours earlier, but I saw 2 dark shadows underneath the door resembling feet. I figured my BFF needed something and woke up, but I called out before getting up because I was annoyed to be awake this early. The feet stayed unmoving, but the knocking stopped. With a heavy sigh, I got up, threw on a sweater, and checked for the time. It was about 10 a.m. I went to open the door. With the shadow still there, I assumed it was my BFF. When I put my hand on the handle to unlock it, I heard a thud. And then, worried that my BFF had fallen, I threw the door open to see the front door closing as if someone was leaving. I ran over and saw a completely black figure turn the corner. I followed, my security guard instincts kicking in. But when I turned the corner, nothing. I went back to my roommate to ask why they were knocking on the walls like that. She heard it from inside my room on an adjoining shared wall to both of our bedrooms. We again called security, but only I was seen chasing after nothing on the cameras. After my boyfriend, a firefighter, started sleeping over frequently because we were both spooked, the fire stopped. And most other things did too. We never had another incident on this level. We moved out after 2 years there, and beyond hearing the usual bang, no other issues.